two, three. Take me out to the ball game. Take me out to the crowd. Buy me some peanuts and Cracker Jack. I don't care if I ever get back. Oh, it's root for the Cubbies. If they don't win, it's a shame. For it's 1, 2, 3 strikes, you're out at the old ball game. Hey!
This is
the Monday Morning Quarterback on the 5th August 2019. This is Boston Red from the Jerry Pippin Memorial broadcast booth as we look at events around the nation. Primarily, the commercial media has been focusing on El Paso, Texas, and the slaughter there by a by a white supremacist, and also in Dayton, Ohio. They are beginning to get bits and pieces together. The killer there was 24 years old. He even killed his own sister. She was 22. And evidently, listening at a report this morning, they named the sister. They have not named the shooter. He was literally killed after about 30 seconds to 1 minute. He was done, as they say. He had a bulletproof vest on. Some other things are there. We'll start this off with the Washington Post, and then we'll make some commentary here. There was what is now known as the El Paso massacre. There was a memo put out there, or a declaration, or whatever you want to call it, and it highlighted attacks in New Zealand. That was Christchurch there, and in the San Diego area with the synagogue. This racist manifesto announcement on an anonymous message board called 8chan, one of the web's most vehement refuge for extreme hate. Now, what has happened in El Paso, and more could happen there, the U.S. attorney there has labeled it a hate crime, and on the statues there that would let the U.S. government move accordingly. Now, the tools are already there, the same tools that the Homeland Security people used against the Islamic State, etc. This surveillance network and these tools are there, and they can be used. In fact, DJ Trump could, by executive order, do a number of things. These companies that facilitate their position on the web could be ordered to move them out, or actually put out of business. They could arrest the person responsible there. All those things can be done on the executive order. And the parallel to that is executive order on issues of immigration. And all Trump has to do is say it's a national security situation. Supposedly DJ Trump will speak later today about the whole situation there with the Attorney General, etc., congressional leaders. There's some legislation that could be put forward and fast-tracked. Nancy Pelosi has talked, and some of the presidential candidates, about calling the Congress and the Senate back to duty in August there to pass special legislation as far as assault weapons. The one used in Dayton was a 100-round assembly there. They would fire 100 bullets, and with the people that were killed and people that were injured there. In El Paso, it was different. It was, I believe, an AR-16 or something of that nature there. It could have actually been an AK, but anyway, it was an assault-style rifle that this individual that drove from the Dallas, Texas area, Allen, Texas, to El Paso, over 500 miles out there, warrants have been executed, and more warrants. They could, in fact, we'll talk a little about Cloudflare, and that element. Warrants can be executed there. If any of these, not only there, but in wherever these so-called competitors, they haven't named them, wherever they are, because one individual there that had owned this A-chain operation lived in the Philippines. That really doesn't matter. Duarte in the Philippines has had his war on drugs. Now he can have his war on cyber criminals. Those things can be done. Sanctions can be used. There's a whole arsenal of tools that the federal government and the Trump administration has and can apply. Now, most would ask, well, is this a First Amendment question? It's not a First Amendment question if these people are advocating violence and giving summaries and supporting violent acts that occurred. That is not ordinary hate speech. That is, as Justice Holmes has said, hollering fire in a cinema. And under that particular situation, and of course under executive powers, that can be done at any time. Part of the problem here has been the reluctance of U.S. law enforcement agencies to declare these people urban terrorists, these basic nationalist and supremacist, European supremacist type organizations. That is changing by the day. The media is now labeling these people urban terrorists with some reluctance. Now, again, this has been policy under many administrations, not just G.J. Trump's administration, and with the commercial media. The commercial media has not handled this correctly. They have, as they say, misguided the ball, period. It hasn't went to the goal. Let me just do a few little things here. This termination letter from the service here, incidentally, they are associated with one of the services that we have. This is somebody named Matthew Prince here, terminating service for A-Chain here, based on the mass shooting in El Paso, Texas, and in Dayton, Ohio. He called them horrific tragedies. The case of El Paso shooting, the suspect gunman appeared to have been inspired by the forum known as 8chan, based on evidence we've seen, and the killing of 20 people at the Walmart there. Unfortunately, it's not an isolated case. You know, the same thing happened in 8chan and before the Christchurch in New Zealand. The El Paso shooter specifically referred to a Christchurch incident and appeared to have been inspired largely by unmoderated discussion on 8chan, which glorified the previous massacre in a separate tragedy. The suspect killer in Palmway, California, there had an open letter also there. 8chan, and this just shows the people that is among more than 19 million internet properties at Cloudflare services. We just sent notice that we are terminating them as a custom effective midnight, so they have disappeared. Cloudflare is a network provider. We don't take decisions lightly in pursuit of our goal of helping build a better internet. We have considered it important to provide our security services broadly to make sure as many users as possible are secure, and therefore making cyber attacks less attractive. Many of our customers run platforms on their own on top of our network. If our politics are more conservative than theirs, it effectively undercuts their ability to run their services, set their own politics. We reluctantly tolerate content that we find reprehensible. Well, that's really not an issue here. He goes on to mention the problem with the Daily Stormer. They were there. That caused a brief interruption in the site's operation using a competitor. Now, the problem here is these competitors will see the light of day and people will understand who they are. It's just that Cloudflare is a bit more well known. There's no longer a Cloudflare problem, but they remain the internet's problem. Well, This is a situation that they're going to have to address. One of the problems there was legislation pushed by internet providers to not hold them liable for content, even if they knew the content was detrimental there. 2 years ago, since Data Stormer, we have tried to have done to try and solve the internet's deep problem is engage with law enforcement and civil organizations to try and find out solutions. And he goes on to talk about the rule of law. Now, we continue to feel incredibly uncomfortable about playing the role of content arbitrator and do not plan to exercise. Often some have wrongly speculated that due to some conception of the U.S. First Amendment, this is incorrect. First, we are a private company. That doesn't really matter, and not bound by the First Amendment. Well, second, the vast majority of our customers, more than 50% of our revenue, comes from outside the U.S., where the First Amendment and similar libertarian freedoms of speech protection do not apply. The only relevance of the First Amendment in this case and others is that it allows us to choose who we do and who do not do business with. It does not obligate us to do business with everyone. Well, here's a problem here. By being on the net and out there, not only is it a First Amendment problem in the U.S., it is a problem in many nations, and it should be, whether he's a private company or not. He doesn't comprehend his obligation, and no doubt there will be lawsuits about this. Instead, our concern has centered around another much more universal idea of the rule of law. Rule of law requires policies be transparent and consistent. While it has been articulated as a framework for how governments ensure their legitimacy, we have used it as a touchstone when we think about our own policies. We have been successful because we have a very effective technological solution that provides security, performance, and reliability in an affordable and easy to use way. As a result, a huge portion of the internet is now sits behind our network. 10% of the top million, 17% of the top 100,000, 19% of the top 10,000 properties, 10% of the Fortune 1,000 are paying Cloudflare customers. Well, the problem with Cloudflare is if there's enough pressure from the public, these organizations would leave Cloudflare, and he knows that Cloudflare is not a government, but they have a responsibility. Nor should they question our content of really societal issues that need political legitimate solutions. We will continue to engage with lawmakers around the world. Well, they have no choice. This is the problem right there. Europe, for example, has taken a lead in this area, as we've seen governments there attempt to address hate and terrorist content online. There is recognized that different obligations should be placed on companies that organize and promote content like Facebook and YouTube, but rather those that are mere conduits for content. Conduits like Cloudflare are not visible to users, therefore cannot be transparent and consistent about their policies. The unresolved question is, how should the law deal with platforms that ignore or actively follow the rule of law? Well, he is one, and that has to be addressed. But again, through an executive order by DJ Trump, that could be addressed overnight, and this character here knows it, and anyone's been to a goat roping contest, LBJ would say, and he repeats Cloudflare's missions to build a better internet and level firing 8chan as a customer is easy. They're uniquely lawless, and lawlessness has contributed to multiple horror tragedies. Enough is enough, no doubt about that. But he has to understand, unfortunately, the action we take today won't fix hate online, no doubt about that. It will almost certainly not even remove 8chan from the internet. but it is the right thing to do. Hate online is a real issue. Well, hate online in the right type of laws, and one of the things obviously they can do is not only take down services, but they can monitor logs, find out IP addresses depending on how the people get there. But they do have the type of tools to do this. Now, Southern Poverty Law Center has something here. I already read that white nationalists who have employed terrorist rhetoric will increasingly enthusiasm in recent months express solidarity there. That's to be expected. Mocking of the dead and that sort of thing. These things have occurred and will continue to occur, and various other characters. Here's somebody named Kevin McDonald, an anti-Semitic former academic who's popularly influential with so-called white nationalists, or actually European nationalists. Twitter, he agrees with the El Paso suspect based on the Universal Manifesto. So the manifesto is out. They call it the Great Replacement. The only comment we make there on the Great Replacement is people in various countries, various civilizations have been replaced, and that is part of that. And again, the idea of terrorism here in itself brings about various other kinds of situations. Here, accelerate in response to breaking news reports of the tragedy and the use of various things like HN and the message app Telegram to call for terrorist attacks like the one in El Paso. Now, the problem there is that calling for these attacks in itself is an act of terror, and as the government gradually moves its emphasis to deal with urban terrorists, you'll see a different landscape out there, because not only do you have Homeland Security, the National Intelligence Agency, CIA, and all these types of characters that will spend more time infiltrating these organizations and monitoring these organizations. So you'll start to see cases built on that period. And this is one of the issues that we'll start to see out in the environment as we end up with a totally different type of environment we have today. This is one of the things that can happen. Environments change virtually overnight, and that is what we're seeing. Incidentally, while we have a minute here, back to technology, we have an open source report. We talked about Capital One, what happened at Capital One, touched on Black Hat, which will be, that conference will be this week, and on the hack of the Russian intelligence group, actually a subcontractor called SciTech, for the FSB. We also talked about that as one of the, and what they were trying to do basically was trying to take out the anonymity of a Tor, the Tor of browsers. So again, that is one of the things happening. So we have a whole bunch of things happening here basically at once. Period. So again, that is the open source report is part of the Boston Red network, and we had Cribs on security, a former reporter for the Washington Post. And we are just here doing a little cleanup as we move along here around. And let's just we want to go to E.J. Dion here. This is by Kevin Williams and various others in the hours before the shooting. His sibling Connor and Megan Betts drove the family's 2007 Corolla to visit this historic district and in the area live, etc. And evidently, I suppose they drove together. Then the police said they separated. It's not clear what Megan, 22, did at this point, but Connor, 24, donned a mask and ear protection, wielding an AR-15 like assault weapon containing 100 rounds. Now, I'm not sure and set off the rampage. Among the first to die was Megan Bess. Her male companion was injured but survived. Many more might have been shot, but this Connor Bess was shot to death there. At least 6 police officers fired rounds at him, and that was the end of that particular situation there. Now, the gun had been legally purchased, they said, and there was nothing in Betts' background that would have raised a concern. Betts had been studying psychology at a local community college, working at a Chipotle restaurant, period. He also had been in trouble in high school at some point, drawing up a hit list. Oh boy. His relationship and such incidents, along with his relationship with his sister, will be of interest, no doubt, to investigators. And this was done in downtown Dayton. And this is an update we had. This is from the Washington Post, and their information here and various shooters. We won't go into this, but it's the Oregon District in Dayton, Ohio. Hadn't been to Dayton in many, many years. And let me just move on here and see if we can... our guns, white nationalists, one side is right, one side is wrong. And this is E.J. Dion Jr. writing on the 4th of August, when one side purports ways that human beings might begin to solve deadly problems, while others side leaves it up to God. You know which side is right. I wonder about that. Speculative there. When one side purports solutions after solutions to contain gun violence and offer compromise after compromise to get it done, while the other side blocks the action, which side is right? When the President of the United States and his most incendiary media allies feel hate of those who are not white, we prefer European, while his opponents say we should stand in solidarity with one another. Well, Hillary Clinton tried that during the 2016 campaign, when one side brushed aside the dangers of racist and white nationalist terrorism, while the other side says we need to be vigilant against all forms of terrorism. Well, that is starting to happen now, but it's moving more to European terrorists, urban terrorists within the U.S. When Americans are gunned down in incident after incident, we are numbed by repeating the same sorrowful words every time. When we move within the news cycle from something must be done to the Senate will block the action. Our politics are too complicated. You know, American democracy is failing, and the moral compass is broken. Well, was there ever more? Killing our rancid political culture is, and quite literally killing our nation. The problem is not caused by some extraction called polarization, a failure of both sides to understand each other. These are alibis of timid souls so intent on sounding balance that they turn their eyes from the truth. What is the truth? Well, what is the fact? We prefer that. When it comes to gun violence, the need to confront white supremacists or white nationalism, one side is right, one side is wrong. Until we face this, even 2 mass shootings within 22 hours, 20 people killed in El Paso, 26 wounded, and then in Dayton, Ohio, 9 dead, 27 wounded there. The shooter was able to kill 9 people and injure 26. That's Nan Wadley in less than a minute. The gun permissive crowd wants us to not think about that minute. It puts a lie to the gun lobby's claim that having people armed nearby when a mass killer strikes is all we need. Well, the wrong side in this debate does not want us to come together. On the contrary, it's a goal after every mass shooting to deflect and divide. Here's what Wheelchair Abbott, he's the governor of Texas, said when asked by reporters what we should do about gun violence. Listen, there are bodies that have yet been recovered. He replied, I think we need to focus more on memorials before we start the policy. He's a liar. Anyway, no Abbott, reading from the NRA script, stated the politics right at the moment and this insidious form of politics. Simultaneously, he deflected by pretending it's impolite to answer substantive questions, and divide by saying those who raise them disrespect the dead. Nothing disrespects those who are slaughtered more than political paralysis. Abbott and those like him are encouraging, invoking God, calling for prayers. Well, has never seemed obscene, but it is obscene to use the Almighty to escape our responsibility. And, well, what DJ Trump said, may God bless them, you may God as the judge, but Trump, for a political strategy whose success depends on sowing racism, reaction, and division, may God judge him for stoking false and incendiary fear about immigrants and invasions, the very words echoed by the manifesto of the suspect in El Paso, Texas. In pursuit of a mythical middle ground, the fault-hearted will counsel against calling out the moral culpabilities of those who are divisive, deflective. Meanwhile, the rationalizers of violence will continue to claim that only troubled individuals, that's the first thing he said. The sane gun laws are the middle ground, and most gun owners support them. Opposing the political exploitation of racism is a moral imperative, and refuses to acknowledge the only one side of the debate seeks intentionally to paralyze us in a path of cowardice. Well, there's no doubt about this, period. And this will continue to be out here, and there will be more El Pasos, Dayton, Ohio's coming up, and we can expect them. This is, let me see when this is written here. This is Robert Moore on the second. We already had this one. So let's go to Charlie Cook. There's several here, and maybe we can go to Charlie. Maybe we completely lost Charlie Cook. Evidently, it's not working out. There are times when sites, for whatever reason, don't work out, and this evidently is one of those situations we have here. Not able to bring you a presentation that we otherwise would have brought to you, and unfortunately, without Charlie Cook, we did get in E.J. Dion, so I suppose we'll go with what we have. We did get the word from site here that finally it's called Cloud Fair. The blog here from the site, this is by this Matthew Prince character on the 5th of August. So this was done tonight, earlier tonight, I guess we would say, and it does sometimes happen, and we'll have to see if we can get this particular thing here, and somewhere we have the baseball scores, and hopefully we can bring this up. We've had some difficulties from time to time bringing this up, but we are lucky we'll get the baseball scores here from last night without having to take a station break. Nonetheless, here we go. The White Sox 10-5 over the Phillies in Philly. The Blue Jays were in Camden Yard. There evidently were no rats infested operators around there. 6-5 was the score. Orioles. The Angels were in Cleveland. The score there was 6-2. The Marlins were at the Rays, a battle of Florida. It was a Rays 7-2 in that race. And in 10, the Reds defeated Atlanta 6-5. Reds had 8 hits, 1 error, and Atlanta 9 hits, no errors. The Mets finally win one over the Pirates in Pittsburgh, 13-2. The Mariners and Astros in Houston, Astros 3-1 in that contest. The Royals and Twins in Minnesota, the Twins 3 shut out the Royals 3-0. And in Wrigley Field, the Cubs 7-2. Mr. Haywood, Mr. Darvish led the Cubs to sweep of the Brewers with a 7-2 win. The Cubs had 14 hits, 1 error, and the Brewers 9 hits and 1 error there. Unusual. They usually split those. The Tigers and Rangers, two teams that are going nowhere. It was 9-4. Rangers over Tigers in Texas. The Giants and Rockies in Denver. The Rockies was 6-2 there. The Cardinals and Athletics in Oakland. Oakland wins one 4-2. The Athletics had 7 hits, 1 error, and the Cards 5 hits and no errors. The Padres and Dodgers in Los Angeles. Very close game there. They usually are. Dodgers 11-10 there. The Padres had 12 hits, 1 error. Dodgers 11 hits and 1 error there. The National and D-backs in the desert. It was the Diamondbacks 7-5 in that contest. And finally, the Red Sox and Yankees in New York. It was the Yankees 7-4. The Sox had 7 hits, no errors, and the Yankees 10 hits and no errors. Yankees pounded Mr. Price for a 4-game sweep. Aaron Judge homered early, and a makeshift Yankees lineup pounded David Price. 7-4 was the final score there. So on we go as we reach the halfway point in Major League Baseball, and we'll quit while we can. On our next report, and we obviously will have a next report, we'll feature Charlie Cook and his take, and along with Charlie Cook we had Amy Walters there in the mix, and there was also a look at Texas. Texas is in play, there's no doubt about that. Texas is changing, and this is one of the problems DJ Trump is having more and more. And the murders in El Paso, the last count I heard, there were 9 Mexican nationals from Mexico killed there. So it creates an international situation. And this whole thing about the internet, in our open source report, we talked about domain management and what the Russian Federation is looking at in case the net went down. They'd have a Russian-only net. Doesn't work out as well. But at this point in time, the whole idea of DNS, of domains, is moving more towards the UN and away from the West. There has to be agreements there, and there also has to be agreements on, as in the EU, just pure hate speech that is non-productive, and when people are killed, and also to address civil liability, and that is something that's coming. This was the problem old Prince over at Cloudflare had there, that the liability was coming, and probably no doubt some people from the Trump administration called him and told him if he didn't pull these characters off, because they're a national embarrassment, they would pull him down. And under national security, these executive orders, they could easily do that, or any other provider that is things that went out of control. This is Boston Red in the Jerry Pippin Memorial broadcast booth on the 5th of August 2019. And as we normally do, we remember our broadcast partner, Jerry Pippin. And also, we remember Heather Heyer from Friday Jobber when we addressed the Charlottesville massacre there, where she was killed in Charlottesville, Virginia, the home of the University of Virginia. So we have a cycle of violence here, perpetrated from San Diego to El Paso, to Dayton, Ohio, to Pittsburgh, down to Florida, and points beyond. This is a national tragedy. In New Zealand, they dealt with it in a systematic way by banning assault weapons after the problem in Christchurch. And have a good week.